SOS Podcast. This is Liz, your host, and we're going to talk today about understanding your target market. And let me introduce the crew today. We have Bryn Tillman, Daryl Prale, Mike Simmons, and John Way. And we are going to answer your sales questions and solve your sales problems. So today, we're going to talk about understanding your target market. And for those of you who are here with us in LinkedIn Live, we're going to start. We're going to do it in 4 segments. So we're going to start by talking about your target market, your ideal customer, your buyer personas. And then we're going to talk about the account-based approach. What does that mean? And how do you successfully use that to I don't like those words, to approach your clients? I am not your attacking salesperson. And then we're going to talk about understanding your client base a little bit in terms of target market. And then we're going to talk about how do you create lists and target your market. So we're going to go into our first podcast, which is ideal customers. So here we go. Hello and welcome to the Sales SOS Podcast. I'm Liz Hyman. And today we're going to be talking about understanding your target market. I have Bryn Tillman, Daryl Prale, Mike Simmons, and John Way. Welcome the crew of the Sales SOS Podcast who are going to help solve your sales nightmares. All right, everybody, let's start and talking about this idea of target market. I know the one thing that we all agree on, I hope we all agree on by this point, is everybody is not my target market. Right? If you sell to everybody, you sell to nobody. So hopefully we're all in agreement on that. Everybody's nodding their head. So what does it mean when we start talking about our target market? What are we talking about here? Why do we need to define a target market? And what is it? And once we talk about that, I want to kind of dig down a little deeper into some of the concepts around a target market. So Daryl, do you want to start today? What is a target market? Since this is what you do.
It is what I do, and I can't not tell you how many times I've had this conversation both with fellow executives, CEOs especially, board members, investors. It's the most confusing thing going where they think they should go or where they want to go versus where they should go. So your target market really that's the market who is most going to want your solution based on your feature set, based on your pain point that you solve, based on your price point, where you're going to have, shall we say, the highest probability of winning, which similarly also means ideally the least competition because you can box them out based on price or features or whatever else. That's your target market. That's where you want to stop. If you try to boil the ocean, go after everybody, you will spend 90% of your time following up on leads and prospects that will never, ever buy from you. So the definition and the importance of the target market is that it's the highest chance of winning and being successful for you in closing a sale while optimizing your time investment to generate that pipeline. How did I do, guys? Good, bad, otherwise?
Yeah, but Daryl, everybody could buy from me. Seriously, I sell something that absolutely everyone could buy. So why would I narrow that target? Why wouldn't I just sell to everybody?
Okay, so do you want to sell to everybody knowing that you might get 1 in 100 deals in an enterprise play, even though you've got entry-level features? Or do you just want to get, massive volume and actually hit your target, your sales quota, and go to President's Club? Sure, you could sell to everybody, but where are you going to get the maximum return for your time? Where are you going to make the most money? Where are you going to have the shortest sales cycle? Where are you going to be the most predictable so that when you submit your pipeline, your forecast report, you actually have a reasonable, incredible chance of hitting it? That's the issue. Yeah, sure, you can try this out to everybody, but should you?
So part of this is prioritizing and part of it is allocating resources, right? And I often say, unless you're Coca-Cola, you're not selling to everybody and you don't have the pocketbook to do it. And by the way, I don't buy Coca-Cola. So you're still not selling to me, right? So what else, you guys, do we need to know about target market? What else is important about this concept? Go ahead, Bryn.
So one of the things we talk about, especially if you've already got an existing business, is take inventory of your clients. Look at where is your most profitable? What clients are you working with that you enjoy? I mean, that's a big thing, right? What is the industry that you happen to serve the best? Where are your best success stories?
So I'm going to stop you, Bryn, because this is such a brilliant topic that I want to use our third segment to really dig into this more, because it is so important to focus on this topic. So yes, 100%. And let's bring us back there in a little bit.
Perfect.
And what else do we need to know about our target market, you guys, before I go to the next?
I saw Mike smiling when I was giving an answer, so I want to see what's on his mind.
You do not want to see what's on my mind. And I just like smiling at you, Daryl. So there you go. So that we've hit two things. Daryl is not my target market. I threw a drawing up over my left shoulder. This kind of mirroring thing has got me a little bit screwed up. But I threw a drawing up over my left shoulder, and it hits on the point that Liz talked about early. Let's not try to boil the ocean. And so, and in order to not boil the ocean, we need to compartmentalize. We're making decisions. We're cutting off people. We're deciding not to serve a specific group so that we can serve the ones that we're in a best position to serve, so that we can make the biggest impact. Now, there might be creep, and not creep like Daryl. Sorry, Daryl was giving me a hard time. I haven't seen him in a while. So, but there might be creep. There might be scope creep in the clients who you could potentially serve. They start to fall outside of the margins, but they're not who you're targeting. They're not who you're targeting. So when you think about target markets, think about who can I eliminate? Who can I cut off so that I can stay very focused on the ones that I am in the best position to serve. I can tell you, for me and my business, I couldn't take on 20 clients. Why am I going to target the entire world if I could not take on 20 clients? So this is about deciding, cutting things off.
Great. John, do you want to add something to this?
Yeah, so I was going to say identifying, or the importance of identifying the target market is not just important in the sales aspect of that, but also in the product roadmap of that. Because your customer is going to be, certain customers are going to say, hey, I want this feature. Certain customers are going to say, I don't want that feature. And if you don't know who your target market is, you're not going to know how to prioritize that. So as a product owner, that's going to be really important to be able to figure that out. And the second thing is not just from a product perspective, but also from a value perspective. Because if you go deep in a specific market, you can extract more value. It's like, hey, this pain that you want to be solved, instead of, you working on this like in Excel or something like that, and you figure it out after 3 months, we have a one-click a button and it's done for you. Right. And now you can extract a lot more value out of that sale, as opposed to trying to be all things to everybody. And you're a Swiss Army knife, and you're one of those platforms, especially in software, where they buy it and then they have to build their solution. Right. That nobody wants that. So yeah. I think having a really strong-minded, customer-focused, know exactly who you're going after, that will really help you do some of those things.
If I could build,
can I jump in?
Yeah, Daryl, jump in, and then I'll jump in.
Wait 1 second.
Oh,
I think you're going to go where I want to go. So I want to differentiate for a second a word. So we talk about target market, and then you'll hear some people talk about your ideal customer profile. Is that where you're headed, Daryl? Or were you headed somewhere else?
Somewhere else completely. Although I thought about ideal customer profile, but I thought, nah, I'll wait on that.
Okay. Then I'm going to go back to this. You say what you were going to say, and I'll go back to the distinction.
Okay. What I want to say is, so obviously this is the Sales SOS podcast. One of the things where sales especially gets tripped up on, in fact, every department gets tripped up on, is viewing the answer to a question like, what is your target market, from only your point of view. I love what we just had, like 2 different points brought up. One was, hey, how profitable is the customer? Most sales reps don't care about that. They just want to close the deal, right? But a CFO, a COO, a CEO, a CRO, an investor, they care about that, all right? Where a product manager or a product marketer, what's the product roadmap? That's my target market. I need to know those features because I need to serve those features. Where again, a lot of sales reps are like, oh, I can't win this deal because I don't have this feature, and they stop. Whereas if I don't have this feature, I need to funnel that information back. Just like if I were talking to somebody in success or support, they're going to look at my target market is the one that churns the least. All right. So when we talk about target market, it's really important you understand not just what you in sales view as your target market, because like Mike said, it helps you maximize your productivity, optimize the ROI you generate in your revenue and your commissions. But also you have to understand it from a corporate citizen point of view that everybody's got a stake in the game and they're going to view it a little bit different. And if you only bring your point of view to the table, you will alienate yourself. Whereas if you're a team player, next time you need a new feature to close a deal you're waiting on, product marketing is more likely to help you out with that, or product management is more likely to help you out with that because you were supportive of them when they wanted certain things that you had no interest in. So target market means different things to different people within the organization. Just be aware of that. That's all I'm saying.
Oh, I think that's super important. Go ahead, Mike.
If I could just add, there is an awesome video on Instagram that is now going to show up in everybody's Instagram feed because everything's always listening. But it is these two dogs, and I forget what kind of dogs. It might be German Shepherds. But anyway, they're one goes through the dog door. The thing that follows that dog in through the dog door is not a dog. It's a deer. Little baby deer follows through, and then the other dog follows through. So the two dogs brought in this not part of the ideal customer profile into the house, leveraging a product in a way that was not intended. And I think that story will resonate for folks who have ever been working with an advisor or has someone on the board suggest that they start working with this customer because it's a new enterprise customer and they can do amazing things and really help catapult your business forward. And ultimately what you end up doing is building in the wrong direction. Like John was talking about, you build for something that is not your ideal and it can be a giant distraction. And now I want to know if everybody ends up getting that same Instagram video in there.
I will let you know, but you're absolutely right. And when I work with founders and they are talking, you show me their wall that looks like what's behind Mike, right? And it has all of the things that people have asked for that they need to do. And then it's like, well, stop, wait. Who do you really want to sell to? And this is where your ideal customer versus your target market starts to come in, right? So if I'm trying to sell to everybody and everybody's buying from me and everybody's asking for different things with my product, then I have this enormous list. If I start going, who's my target market? Like, who am I going after? What's the demographic of the kinds of companies that I'm going after? Then I can start to narrow down which of those things are most important. When I take it a step further and I start talking about, but who's my ideal customer? Like, okay, if they're this kind of company and they're this size and they're in this geography and they use this technology, use all these demographics, and I say, this is my target market. And then I go, but truly, my ideal customer are ones that don't have a lot of turnover because then they learn to use my product better and I don't have to keep doing all these things to make it easier. There are people who value some of the same things that I do. That might be things like they have cash flow. It might be things like, they can actually pay their bills, but there might be these other things. It might be companies who are at a certain point in their growth. They're adding something. They're tackling a new market. Something's happening in their environment that makes it the right time for them to use this product. Now, when I start working on selling to them, when I start working on messaging, when I start working on how do I make this product fit, now I am working in the arena of those people that Daryl said are most likely to buy from me, will probably have the shortest sales cycle, will most likely buy from me again and refer me, and they'll be easy to work with because there's a really good fit between my product, their product, and they'll be profitable, right? Woohoo! That's what we want. Go ahead, Brem.
So if you guys remember the book, I think it's from the 90s, Raving Fans by Ken Blanchard. A quote, I think I'm going to get it because I used to quote it all the time in my training. So I'll see how close I get. It's not enough to simply satisfy your customers. You must create raving fans, customers who are so excited about the way you treat them that they want to tell everyone about you. You do this by choosing what you want to be known for, making sure that all of your actions reinforce that message.
Yeah.
So choosing what you want to be known for. I got close anyway.
You're really close.
Choosing what you want to be known for is part of who you want to know you for it, right? So I think that in creating those raving fans, right? If you're taking every suggestion from everyone and you're rolling out new features and functions for everyone, you're never going to create that subset of raving fans because they haven't been a priority.
I also think that you have the ability to charge more. So I was working with a client and they were going to conferences, and their conference was full of a lot of people who were not their ideal customer. So they had a very complex platform that enabled companies who worked in many countries across many cultures and many languages to manage content, very briefly. But they were at conferences where most of the people were not international Fortune 500 companies. So they kept saying, well, we don't want to pay that much. We can get an equivalent product for less money. And I'm like, but that's because they're not your ideal customer and they don't want to pay for the features that your ideal customer is willing to pay a lot of money for. So figuring out where you fit and where people will actually pay for what value you bring is important. Mike, you got that look on your face.
I always have this look on my face. Some people like it, some people don't like it, some people get scared by it. I think there's this challenge that we run into where we're like, what if I miss out?
Right.
Yes. It's hard to say no to someone who's willing to give you money.
Especially when you're just starting a business.
Yeah.
Or you're looking at your runway and you're thinking about cash flow and you're thinking about mouths that you feed, whether they're people inside your organization, your family, your other customers. Like there's this kind of fear of missing out that ends up happening. And this idea of what if, and what I would challenge people to think is, what if you actually recommended a competitor because they're actually a better fit?
Now, my dad would love that statement.
Yeah. So now this one I won't know as well, but there's the book 10X. It's the big one, right? It's a big one right now, right? They talk about, and the example I remember is the Keller Williams person who you get rid of 80% of your business and focus on the 20. And then once you get to that point, get rid of the 80% of that business and go to the 20%. And, so I think, ideally, as we build our business, we can think in that bigger picture. But I have story after story about bringing on the wrong clients, that I think I can serve well, but it takes up so much time that I'm not able to go out and find the right clients. Yeah. So, right. So even though I think it's bringing me more money, and it probably isn't the short term, it's absolutely costing you big money in the long term.
Yes.
So, and this is a concept that I was working with a client with recently, which is this idea of scarcity versus abundance, and a scarcity mindset versus an abundance mindset. And an abundance mindset says there is plenty of business out there that I want, that I should go after. But my client's perception was an abundance mindset meant we can do anything. So we'll just do it. I'm like, no, that's not. Because what happens then is you're really having a scarcity mindset, which means you're so worried that what you want won't come along that you're willing to do whatever it takes to deal with whoever's at your door. And an abundance mindset would say, there's plenty out there. There's plenty to go. It's why sitting here in this room who could be competitive are willing to sit here in the room together because there's plenty. We believe there's plenty to go around. And there is, right?
High tide rises all ships.
Yes.
John, you've been quiet. Anything you want to add?
Well, I was just thinking about the question for all of you sales experts, which is, what do you do in a sale or how would you counsel a sales organization who has been, we're going to be all things to all people, right? How do you actually get them to focus?
I would
turn that
counsel
ship
them to
around.
fire their leadership. That's what I would do. But that's an aside.
Plus one.
Right? Well, so part of what I do is get them to start thinking about being strategic. So if you give your salesperson a number and you tell them to go get it, they're going to do it the easiest way possible, which may have absolutely nothing to do with your strategy. So if you have a strategy and you're really clear about who your ideal customer is, where you want repeat business, which of your products you want to sell more of, what kind of price you want, you're really strategic about it. Now you can begin to build lists and categories and priorities for your salespeople to follow. But if your senior leadership is, and we want to sell all things to all people, it's impossible to prioritize. So your salespeople are going to go, I have to hit this number. I'm going to do it the easiest way possible.
So for me, what I would do is I would tell them, you think you can do for everybody? Fair enough. Let's just, humor me for a little bit. Let's do an analysis of your customers and let's figure out which ones are the most profitable. So we're going to figure out their lifetime value by segment. That would be industry or, individual niches within those industries. And we look at things like then, NRR, net recurring revenue, et cetera. So that they start to understand that, sure, you could sell your solution to all people. But you look at these segments, you actually lose money on because they churn really fast. These segments you break even on. These segments you make a little bit of money. And these segments you make a boatload of money because they stick around forever and they love you. Okay, if all things are equal and you don't have to invest an additional dollar, if you took your existing resources and only focus on those ones that did a whole bunch of profit or even a modest amount of profit and drop the rest, what would your overall margins be as an organization? All right. What would your value be? What would your multiple grow into? And when I frame it that way, then they start to go, oh, okay, I get it. But until you do that, they think they can do all things for all people.
Right. And I want to dive way more into that, like I said, in the third segment, because this is so important. When you start looking at the data, it's really alarming sometimes because you just don't realize. Okay. So we have about, 2 more minutes left. So let's really quickly, the next segment, we're going to talk about account-based. And I want to kind of dig into the different kinds of buyers. But if we have an ideal customer, let's talk about this concept a little bit more. So we've got this target market, this kind of general thing. We've got this ideal customer. The next thing is if you're a company that has a complex sale and you sell to multiple buyers, within that ideal customer, which is a company, you have all these buyers. And I've actually heard marketing people say to my clients, okay, so this is your ideal buyer. And this is who we're going to market to. What's your Bryn's? You can't, for those of you who can't see it, Bryn just scrinched up her face. Like, oh my goodness, no one would never do that. So how do you respond to this, you guys?
I just want to play poker with Bryn. That's what I want to do. Because everything comes across, right? So Bryn, go ahead. I'll let you answer first, and I'll jump in.
I mean, here's the thing. You may have a buying committee. You may know all of the players that are typically part of the conversation. But if you solely focus on, this is my typical where I start my conversation, you're going to miss out on a ton of opportunities because you don't always know where that conversation is starting. You don't know what's happening inside of that organization. And is it the CFO that's concerned, even if you typically sell to the CMO? Who is the one that is Googling solutions? We need to look at the entire buying committee. Now, you can put priorities around typical people, but if we ignore the whole buying committee, we're going to lose out on a lot of opportunities.
Do you guys have any other thoughts on that?
A lot.
Go, Mike.
Right. So think about a problem that you're solving for in the marketplace. There are people who have the problem. There are people who are impacted by the problem. And there are people who care about the people who have the problem or are impacted by the problem. And they're people. They're not personas. Personas are fictional beings. Fictional beings have manufactured problems. Real people have real problems. Start focusing on the people who have the problem or impacted by the problem, care about the problem. You'll find that those people can be a catalyst to help you get things moving forward. So that's Those are my thoughts. Focus on the people, not the persona, not this avatar.
John, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I was going to say I wanted to echo Bren's thought, which is, I mean, that philosophy that you outlined there sounds very B2C, meaning there's one person, there's one buyer, and there's one persona. In B2B is very usually, like Bren said, there's a committee. Usually there are multiple committees. Usually you get through one, then you get to another, then you get to another, right? And so trying to say, oh, there is an ideal. I guess my I don't like the word ideal. If you just say there are buyer personas, I would agree. But if there's an ideal one, I'm like, well, that's going to be tough because there's so many of them. Because as everybody knows, in a B2B, there's a lot of people that can say no, but there's only one or two people that can say yes. And so you have to understand all of those people and all of those players. So that's what I would say about that.
Can we have our first fight on the SOS podcast?
You mean you want to fight about this buyer persona thing?
Well, I just want to fight in general. First, I'm asking if we can fight, and then
yes, absolutely. But I would love to just do a whole discussion of the buyer persona thing another day because we could totally fight about that.
Before we fight or go into a lengthy conversation, can I just give one more opinion on this whole idea of who's the buyer / persona? So here's something that's important for sales to understand and marketing. All right, especially if you're still new to the industry. Marketing is going to look at the buying committee, but Bryn hit it. She's going to say, who's the one Googling solutions? Who are the individual? Let's say the buying committee is 10, 12 people, whatever it is, in a complex sale. Who are the 2 or 3 people who are tasked with finding a short list of vendors who can possibly solve their problem? That's top of funnel stuff. That's what marketing is going to focus on and go to their shows and do their email blasts, and that's what they're going to do their social media with. However, where marketing gets it wrong and where sales gets it wrong is sales wants marketing to only focus on those people because they want more leads. Marketing forgets about everybody else often to their detriment. In the end of the day, marketing is measured by the actual revenue they bring in, but they're handcuffed by the fact that sales has to do the final conversion. So how does marketing make this work for them? They understand who the personas they focus on at top of funnel to get the leads in. Then they understand the personas they want to focus on making content or otherwise in middle of funnel or bottom of funnel to move it through the decision-making process to help their sales counterparts overcome objections and establish themselves as leadership. So marketing's got to focus on the big picture, but at the right stage. Sales is got to understand that marketing's focused on more than just top of funnel. Okay, I'll shut up.
Perfect. And you have just led me to our next segment. So I'm going to wrap this one up. And I want to just say really briefly that when you are marketing to a specific persona, and that is the person that comes onto the website and does the searching, they're the ones that oh, I left Renee out. Hang on a second. So those are the people that are doing the searching, but as John said, they're not necessarily the people that can say yes. And so I want to take us to our next conversation, which is talking about account-based marketing, which is if you land sales in the land of what we would call at Miller Heiman, the technical buyer, you've left them in no man's land. So let's wrap this conversation up with that, and let's start the next one, and let's talk about account-based, or this concept that, anyway. Okay, so we'll see you on the other side. Welcome to the Sales SOS Podcast. I'm Liz Hyman, and I'm here with your Sales SOS Podcast crew, Bryn Tillman, Daryl Prell, Mike Simmons, John Way, and Renee Bigelow. And we today are talking about your target market. And right now we've talked about target market. If you didn't hear this conversation, jump back to the prior podcast. We're going to talk now about this idea of account-based marketing because we wrapped up our last segment by saying, if you are only focused on the buyer that does the outreach, who is what we call in Miller Heiman your technical buyer, meaning they had a checklist of things they were supposed to make sure this tool or solution did, then you throw sales out there and they're with a person who's going to keep telling them, oh, no, I'm the buyer. I've got all the control. Don't talk to anybody else. Oh, no, I'm managing this. And that is never a place that you want to be. So let's talk a little bit about this concept of account-based. What people are using this term all the time. When I was young, we called it a complex sale. But what is this concept of account-based? Renee, we haven't heard from you yet. Do you want to jump in and define account-based marketing or account-based sales for us?
Well, I mean, I'll just say it sort of maybe in super layman's terms, and I'm sure everybody else has something they want to add to this definition, but I'll just start it off by saying what you're looking at for account-based marketing is making sure that you have all the people who will benefit from the product, be asked to use the product, be involved in the purchase of the product, and that you can approach the marketing and the sale from their perspective. So how they will be involved, how it solves their problem, what it's going to change or interrupt. Often there's one department who's going to have pain because something comes on, and they need to understand what that pain is for and why it's benefiting the company overall. So understanding the different perspectives for all the people involved. And that'll just kind of get us started, but I'm sure others want to add in.
Who wants to jump in next?
I'm happy to jump in.
Oh, Bryn.
So a typical ABM is when the whole company gets involved around a selected number of whales, right? We've identified we want to get into these 20 accounts. Marketing is on, marketing and sales and customers. So everybody is on the same page that we want to land these accounts. And they have now buyer mapped everyone, the challenges, everyone inside of those specific organizations. There's no general anymore. It's hyper personalized, hyper relationship based on these accounts. Now, that is not something that most companies implement any longer. From that high level, what ABM was, I think, initially rolled out to be. So I call it account-centric sales.
There you go.
Right. So it's not account-based, but I may have my top 20 and I might work with marketing to get into those top 20, but I'm not closed to only those folks. I'm prospecting other people. I'm open to, opportunities that come in the door, and we're not only focused on that top 20. But here's the key: whether you're account-based marketing or you're account-based sales, you have to buyer map really well. You have to use your social proximity, who can help you get into these accounts, so that you're not like starting out this very high level complex sale with cold calling. And we have to bring value that they are not seeing anywhere else when we're at that level, whether it's through our content or our conversation. And the value is different for each role. So we have to make sure that if we are going to go account-centric sales or account-based marketing, that we have done an enormous amount of research and social listening, and we're prepared to go to market versus let's go to market and then figure it out later. So that's my thought.
The one thing I want to jump in on here,
Thanks,
building on
Daryl.
what Bryn was saying, I know I'm so shy, I got to work on that, is that ABM, and by definition ABS, but definitely ABM, there is a difference. First off, Bryn nailed it. She's 100% right. People need to understand that because they often confuse it. Is ABM is not something that's relevant or appropriate for everybody. So if anybody listening to this, they just need an ABM solution that's going to solve all your problems, I would say hold the horses. You need to have a high value customer. In other words, a $100 or $1,000 sale isn't going to be something you want to implement for an ABM. You want a $100,000 sale or more. All right, that's number one. Number two, you want to have a very defined list, exactly like what Bryn was getting at. In other words, what we typically do in an ABM model is you might say anyone rep is going to have 10 named accounts that are their whales, then maybe 40 tier 2 accounts, and then maybe 500. When I have time, I'll go touch them. Otherwise, or I may elevate somebody from stage 3 to stage 2 if stage 2 gives me a hard no, that kind of thing. But I'm primarily focused on those tier 1, those 10 whales. Third thing is marketing's got to have a big ass budget. So to do ABM, if marketing doesn't have like $100K a month, they're dropping a pay-per-click, and that's just an arbitrary number. But in other words, it's not $5K a month. You see what I'm getting at? Then again, you're not a candidate for ABM. So I just want to make sure that's out there, because a lot of people drop ABM like it's the solution. If ABM doesn't apply to you, either they're not a high value prospect, they don't have a big, average selling price, or you don't have the budget to do on the pay-per-click side, that doesn't stop you from doing ABS. In my day, we would have called that target account selling, but I'm just going to go after some named accounts, right? And that's awesome. And that ties back to our last conversation we had at the last episode about your target markets and your ideal customer. Naming them, going after them, identifying and building out that buying committee, and understanding what their individual pain points, that Mike was saying, is spot on, and that's how you get engagement. But there is a big difference from the two, and not everybody's a candidate for it. So don't waste time if you don't fit the ideal profile of an ABM marketer.
Mike or John, do you want to add something? I'm going to jump in then quick, and then I'm going to let you go, John. So one of the things that we can do is kind of skinny down that concept of account-based. So there's this, and again, I just kind of use account-based without an end to it, because account-based marketing, account-based lead gen, account-based sales, they all have a slightly different meaning. But we can kind of skinny down the concept too, and say, and put in place a plan that, for instance, if somebody comes in and is a company that we would love to really land, and the technical buyer, somebody who's just kind of doing the research, lands on our site and downloads some stuff, we can then quickly jump into an account-based approach. So we can say, hey, we want this one. Have a team in place that will go then identify who are all of the other buyers in that potential account that we might want to talk to, and then decide, are we going to market to them? Is the salesperson going to call them? What are we going to do to rally around this potential account that we really want? And then how is sales and marketing going to work together to execute that? So it doesn't always have to be we're going to spend $1 million and do this really dynamic and well thought out account-based targeted marketing campaign and sales campaign. But we can sometimes use those concepts to help us move further into a selling environment that we want to be in. John, did you want to say something before I jumped in and said that?
I was just going to add on to what y'all said from the strategy that I saw, being done at the enterprise is, everybody said it, and I'll go a little bit deeper, which is you're going to have all of your ducks in a row. And one of the things that I saw really specifically was not only do you have to have, your marketing, I guess, for lack of a better word, more of your top of funnel assets, but you also need a lot of marketing assets down at bottom of funnel. So examples of like customer references, are they all green? Because you're going to need to pull them. Do you have like really good, I guess even more in depth in industry, like almost like near account case studies and things like you have to have all of those things ready to go, because you like Brent said, you cannot make this up on the fly. So I would definitely say that you need to have a plan to make that happen.
Building off what John said, again, because with the sales SOS podcast, if you're a bag carrying sales rep, exactly to John's point, when you are on those discovery calls and you're identifying, quantifying not only what the pain issues are, but the consequences of those issues, the full impact, you must, underline, exclamation mark, share that with marketing. And you must influence marketing and their content team to make you content like those case studies, like those ebooks and white papers, so that you can go back to these target accounts and say, these are our other customers who you compete with probably, solve the problem. It's hyper narrow. Marketing is going to resist, because marketing wants to make stuff that applies to top of funnel, to hundreds or thousands of people. They don't want to make stuff that applies to 10 people. So this is the back and forth, but you have to give them that information, because in those nuggets, you're also giving marketing hot buttons and messaging that they can use in their demand gen programs that will feed the machine. So I cannot tell you enough, build that relationship with your marketing and push them hard. They will push back. That's okay. That's the give and take.
One of the cool things that happens with strategic accounts, which is where a lot of these types of accounts would fall into, is it goes beyond that initial demand gen, beyond the initial acquisition, and into things like retention and expansion, retention and growth. And then you start to think about, hey, how can we rally the entire team, as was said a couple of times here, around what to do with this customer? And that includes marketing, sales, customer success, customer support. If you've got product-led growth, if you've got a product-led growth motion that you're using, some kind of freemium type thing that's out there, you start to look at people who might be operating inside those companies because they're coming from the same IP range, even if they're not using a company known email address. You start to pull all of this data together and start to get really targeted around the specific companies that you're focused on. And now marketing, even though it's not the 100,000 people out there in the market who are potential, it might be the 100,000 people inside a company that could be potential users of the product. So you start to get into that end user discussion, which is really one of the really cool things about taking a strategic account or a targeted account or a named account or an account-based approach to figuring out new ways to grow your business.
And I think we could spend hours just talking about how to grow key accounts. And that is definitely on our list because it's super important. I want to back up just a second to I'm trying to make a sale to a complex, to an enterprise or to a large company that is a complex sale with multiple people involved in the buying process. One of the things that I hear often is, well, John said he was going to get so-and-so too, or Charlie said da-da-da-da, right? My guy said, I call it my guy selling. My guy said this is going to budget. My guy said that the CEO said, my guy said. So if you're the sales leader or you're the company owner and you just only hear one name and it's a big sale, $100,000, $200,000, whatever, $1 million, and you're talking, your sales rep is talking about my guy over and over and over again, one person who's going to do everything, they're not. And the chances of you losing, those are the surprises, right? We had that one all wrapped up. What happened? Well, the competitive sales rep happened to be talking to the CEO instead of your guy, right? Yep. And so this idea of understanding who all the buyers are, and if I go back, and I have to go back, to my Miller Hyman days and talk about, wins. What are my wins and what are my loses? If I don't know who all those people are, I am not going to make sure that they win by making this decision. And the other thing that I see with SaaS right now is we're doing this with one person. Oh, this person is buying this product for everybody. And then what happens? John, what happens? One person bought it. What happens with all the users?
They don't adopt.
Biggest problem in SaaS right now, failure to adopt. What happens next year when it's time to renew?
No renewal, no value.
Because the sales approach was my guy selling. It was single contact, make this deal. No one ever went to figure out what the users wanted and how to get them to adopt it. And if they were going to, go ahead, Mike.
It's this thing that drives me absolutely crazy. You see all the crap out there on LinkedIn about multi-threading. And then nobody goes and does it. Like nobody knows what it is. Nobody understands. They don't go further. And I know we talked about it a little bit before. It's people have the problem, people are impacted by the problem, people care about the problem. If you understand those three people inside the organization, it's amazing the kind of information that you can get from them and guidance that you can get from them around how to operate inside the organization. Never forget, you're an outsider. Like when Intel, one of my goals when I was working with Intel as a client was to be a green badge. I wanted to get a green badge, and a green badge is a contract employee at Intel. Blue badge is an employee who works inside the organization. I never got to the point where I got a green badge at Intel, even though I spent a lot of time in and around the organization. I felt like they felt like I was an employee inside the organization. I dressed like them when I was there. Depending on if I was up at Santa Clara where they were dressing a little bit nicer, or I was out in Jones Farm or Hillsboro in Oregon where I was dressing kind of like this. Like there are ways to do this, and the takeaway I hope that people are getting from this as you listen is operate with a level of intention with each of the interactions you have with the people that you get a chance to work with inside your customer base and across your potential customer base, and good things will happen. You'll get that reputation of, you know, being the person to go to when they run into a problem.
The
Liz,
one thing
can
I
I
will jump in here, I'm sorry, I'll shut up. I'll go quickly. One thing I did all the time, both as whenever I held the title of CMO or CRO at any company, because different reasons, but same outcomes, is I would actually go to revenue ops. And I would say, for these major deals, I need you to alert me. And I would ask this usually 24 to 40 hours before we had our forecast review. Of all the top deals, if no communication has been made on a regular basis with our champion, or if no communication has been made with the rest of the buying committee in a regular, frequent time, because those were red flags. Because that way I knew that we were probably going to forecast this revenue, but the chances are of us getting it were minimal, because exactly what we just talked about was that the competition had a conversation with the CEO and lost the deal. So I can't look at those things all the time, but revenue ops, those people are stunning at what they do, and they are a resource to be utilized. So just a sharing something I do in a leadership role that you can do as well. So sorry, I want to share that.
So Renee, and then let's jump to Bryn.
Sure. I was just going to share 2 points, kind of go along with some of what I said early in the broadcast, which is, one is your marketing team often will be the people who start seeing a bubble within a company coming. So if you have a resource or an asset out there, and all of a sudden you're starting to see 4, 5, 6 people at the same company downloading things, you can flag those for sales. So that's a big thing that marketing can help out a lot with, because they may not have hit a top 20, but there's a lot of traction happening that you don't expect, right? Like they could become a top 20 quickly. So there's one. And the other is, I think it's very critical in when working with account-based, however you want to call it, account-centric, whichever, and marketing can help a lot with this and sales enablement related tools. And that is to understand not just who your key buyers are, but who your key blockers are.
Yeah.
Because your key blockers need to be sold into the change, and they need to understand what the repercussions of whatever this is will have on their department. And they need to understand, like, most of the time, why they need to come along, right? Some of the time they need to understand that there's something better in it for them. And then you can have the sales enablement materials that will help you with that will help the people who are trying to get past those champions, those internal champions who are trying to get past the blockers. You may need it for them in a meeting you're not a part of, or you may need it in meetings with the blockers. So I'll just stop with those 2 points.
So hang on one second, Bryn. I want to just say, when marketing teams are trying to ask how they can help in the sales process, if the sales team will tell marketing what the most common objections are, or who their most common blockers are and why they block, marketing can create content that helps them solve that problem, right? But instead, as salespeople, we do not want to think about the naysayers. We do not want to think about the potential problems. We don't want to mention something that might bring up an idea they don't already have, right? And so thinking about possible objections and working with marketing on tools can be really helpful. Okay, Bryn, what were you going to say?
Well, so my first biggest account that I ever got in teaching LinkedIn was Aramark. Aramark had just finished Challenger training, and they said to them, "What's next?" And they said, "Go get some LinkedIn training." So I walk into Aramark. It's how I got in there is a long story, but they said, "Here's the thing: Miller Heiman is our core strategy. How do we implement this and Challenger and LinkedIn?" And they handed me a gold sheet.
Yeah.
Right. And they said to me, this is our relationship mapping tool. How do we use everything you do to fill out this gold sheet with the concept of Challenger sale behind it? And, so this, I feel like it just all kind of came together, right? So the gold sheet, there's green sheets and gold sheets and all kinds of
Blue
fabulous
sheets.
colors
Blue
and
sheets.
blue sheets. But the gold sheet, if I remember correctly, and correct me if I'm
Yeah,
wrong.
no, the gold sheet is a key account plan. Yep. It's a
Okay,
large
so
account
that
plan, I
so
think
it
is
was
what we call it.
mapping out all of the players. And so now with LinkedIn as a tool, you could do it in 5 minutes, 15 if you're really spending a lot of time on it. But then the challenger sale piece was to identify, what were the issues that each of those stakeholders were having.
Okay,
And
that was a blue sheet. That one was a blue sheet. So
okay, well,
but it doesn't
started
matter.
with
The point is that you're mapping it and you understand it and you know who all the players are, and you are never turning your back and going, I don't want to deal with that problem. You map it all out, you follow it, you figure out what you have to do to overcome the objections, to handle the red flags, to leverage your strengths. So absolutely. So what's interesting, by the way, they have been a Miller Hyman client. I assume they still are, since I was probably a teenager. So
Wow.
talk about doing a really
Like
good
5 years.
job. 5 years, 10
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Doing a really good job of selling something in, staying in touch. I can't say that what's happening with it now, but back in those days, that was a complex sale that the company rallied around and really made sure that everybody was invested in the success. And we can do that. And 20 years later, 30 years later, actually, I hate to admit how many years later, they're still a client. And that's amazing.
Yeah.
But we can
I
all do
want to just briefly talk about, you were talking about, ABM and going after target accounts, and Rin showed incredible restraint and only brought up LinkedIn this late in the process. That should have been like almost like once we know who our accounts we're going to go after are, like we should need to talk about building accounts, because that's the one thing I see over and over and over again is sales reps are not great at building the account list. I'll start there, but then I'll be gracious and say, but most companies are not great at building defined lists. And I cannot tell you how many times I've had to fight to buy basic tools like Navigator or any kind of Zoom Info or other type tools to build lists. Yeah, exactly. And it could be something basic. It could be a much more affordable solution, right? It doesn't have to be Zoom Info. It could be Hoover. It could be a variety of tools out there. Why is it? I'll throw it to the crew here. Why is it that most people don't understand that? They don't want to fund it, even though it's so critical, because they all talk about targeting accounts. Go ahead, Bryn.
The tool stack has been exploited for so long now. When I was at PeopleLinks as the chief learning officer, the first thing we would do is take inventory of the tool stack.
Yep.
And about 80% of the tools they purchased, they were burned. Whether it didn't do what it said they were going to do, doing what they said it was going to do was too hard, doing what they said it was going to do didn't actually become effective in the sales process. The tool stack is overwhelming. So I believe today people have gone on that other pendulum side. I overspent for many years and now I refuse to spend. And there's a happy medium there, right? And the other thing is the tools that are so siloed, right? You've got this tool that does outreach, and this tool that does data management, and and you've got all these things that aren't talking to each other, and the tool itself sold into a decision maker that was wowed by the demo and said, oh, this is the answer, right? And so they spent all this money on tools, yet they never got any of what was promised from any of them. So I think there's just a tool shyness now. Now, the irony is most of the companies that won't buy tools or that are cheap about buying tools are a tool themselves.
Yes.
So,
but I also
think I'll add one other reason real quick why they're not buying the tools. And we already nailed it when we started talking about account-based marketing, and that is adoption is horrible with most of the tools because nobody spends any time making sure that people know how to use it and get the value out of it. I just say that because one of the top things that I get asked to do is audit the tools, and everybody says, we're not getting this, we're not getting that. And then they've narrowed it down to 2 or 3 people who actually are using it. So they're the only people using it. Those people leave, and then they cut the tool.
I think there's another piece to it, because I think those are absolutely right. I think there's also this concept of every tool is an investment. Oh, this is an investment. It will save you time. Oh, this is an investment. It will do whatever, save you money by spending money. But in any case, what we've missed is, in order for your sales team to be effective, you must invest in the training and the tools that they need to be successful. And so we almost need to train leadership to think differently about investing in sales success. That does not mean, by the way, and you guys have all seen this, you need every single tool there ever was in order for your sales team to be successful. And the sales team's going like, okay, I have to go to 7 different tools in order to do my job. No, I don't want that. So we don't want to invest in everything, but we really want to be thoughtful about what do they need in order to make them more efficient, more effective in their sales job. Okay. Any last thoughts on account-based before we jump to our next topic?
I'll add just one little parting thought that's a tip for people to think about. If this is kind of new to you, this is where marketing can help a lot with some of your fields and your data. You're going to probably need to kind of clean it up. You're going to need to think about some progressive profiling with some of the contacts that you have and getting more information. Titles is one that I see like missing in so many customer databases when I get into them. And you really do need to know titles if you're going to go after this. So if you're even contemplating this being part of your strategy, working on that data is a really big first step.
Yeah, I just want to say how impressed I am that Renee mentioned progressive profiling. Awesome. We need way more of that. That's awesome.
Okay, we're going to wrap up this segment. I think the key takeaway is understand who's involved in the buying process, and then figure out as a team what's your approach. Is this a targeted account we're going after and we need to surround? Is this somebody who's come to us and we need to figure out how to do it? How does marketing support sales to touch all of the different buyers? How does leadership make sure that sales is actually talking to all the buyers? How do we stay in touch in a complex business-to-business sale with all of the people that we need to be in touch with, and in order to make the sale? Okay. So we are going to now jump into our next topic. So hi, I'm Liz Hyman, and this is your Sales SOS podcast. And I have today with me your crew: Bryn Tillman, Daryl Prowl, Mike Simmons. I just lost your name, Mike. It didn't come out of my mouth. John Way and Renee Bigelow. And we are here to solve your toughest sales problems. So today we're talking about understanding your target market. And in the last two episodes, we talked about target market. What does that mean? And then we talked about this account-based approach, or this complex buying situation that you're selling into. And now we're going to talk about understanding your client base. So as we began to talk about building your target, we automatically started talking about you can't understand who your ideal customer is until you understand your client base. So I want to talk about a couple of things in terms of targeting. I want to talk a little bit about how do we target inside of our client base? How do we use our client base in order to identify who our target market or ideal customer is for marketing purposes? And then Renee, I'm going to really lean on you a little bit about how we use that information. And Renee talks about this flywheel. And I have to be honest, I still don't fully understand what a flywheel does, because me and engines are just, that's never a good conversation. My mechanic laughs at me endlessly. But this idea that you want to build momentum within your company. And so that much I understand, momentum. So let's dive into this concept of understanding our client base. And let's go back to what we were talking about. Is the first thing is, if we want to understand who we should be targeting, we first need to understand what's happening with the clients that we already have. If we have an existing business, if we're a brand new business, that's a whole nother thing. But if we've been around the block for a while, let's talk a little bit about digging into and understanding our client base, and then figuring out who are the clients. What does it mean to have an ideal customer? And Daryl, you started us with this, and Bryn, you were talking about it. If one of you guys wants to start again, that would be great. Okay,
I was going to suggest Bryn. She's way better than I am.
Okay, this is the first time. This is our 11th show, and this is the very first time that somebody pointed the finger and said, two people pointed the finger and said somebody else should do it.
I'm happy to go.
Jump in, Bryn.
So we need to take inventory of our existing clients, the good ones, the not so good ones, the ones that we love to work with, the ones that we've done a really good job for. And then we have to break down their features, right? Their industry, the size company, maybe the revenue, maybe who they sell to. And we really want to take a good look and pick out, and I think the 3 to 5 of your favorite customers that you want more of. And for me, if you've got an existing business, this is the ideal way to go, because you know how to sell into them, and you know that when you sell into them, there's the best adoption compared to your other clients. You know that you have success stories that you can replicate into the new businesses, and you have credibility in the space. So I think that starting there is really important. I'm going to hand it off, but I do want to say one more thing. And this is what we do, is now you want to find all of those features mapped out to LinkedIn search functions. So what filters fill in all the blanks for those top 5 clients so that we can search and find more lookalikes. So I'll pass it on to Daryl now.
Okay, so this is brilliant. This is a good transition. I love how you handle that off with the filters. I'm going to circle back to that when I wrap up my initial spiel. When you look at your customers, all right, we talked about this in the previous episode, you need to, work with somebody who's really good with Excel or Google Sheets, and understands the numbers. That's the first part, right? They're just either data scientists or they're just a whiz with spreadsheets. Because you want to do an analysis of your customer base by a multitude of attributes. In other words, let's break down the customer base by their industry, or by the company size, or by the annual revenue, or by the average sales cycle, or by how much they expand, or by their churn. You want to get all these numbers so you can sit back and say, okay, because what happens is the following. If you were to put everybody in a room, and I've done this, and it's hilarious, I've done this multiple times, put all the leaders of a company in the room, each individual tasked with owning sales, marketing, product management, development, whatever, and say, who is our most profitable customer? Who should our target customer be? You will get, guaranteed, a different answer from every single person. So the only way to create alignment is to do this analysis, and you watch everybody's reaction go, I didn't know that. That's the first part. Second part is, now that you've identified 2 or 3 segments that have great profitability, great lifetime value, great NRR, whatever the attributes that you deem important to be, you need to look at, okay, that's what we want. So if we were to take that and look for, that exact audience and go bigger and go hard after them, what's my total addressable market? Because what you're going to find is 9 times out of 10, you've got something that's so specific that the total addressable market isn't big enough for you to prospect and feed the sales machine and get enough conversions to hit your revenue numbers. You got to do that funnel math. So sometimes you need to look at multiple segments, or you need to expand to adjacent markets because to build upon what you got. Finally, exactly where Bryn started, this is me bringing it full circle, your sales and marketing, your revenue teams need to be able to find these people. And if you cannot filter on them using LinkedIn, using Hoovers, using Zoom Info, using whatever tools you're using, then it's all for naught. Now, last thing I will say, no one's talked about this yet. You've got all the data, you can find the people, you can build your ideal customer profiles, but what you need to do now is get all the key stakeholders to physically go and talk to your customer base to make sure you actually understand the pain points and the impact it's having. Marketing sucks for doing this, all right? Sales will say, we live it, we breathe it every single day. But of course, sales tends to go to where they're comfortable. So even they often have a skewed point of view. So you need to talk to these people and really build up a full ideal customer profile with personas for your whole buying committee so that you understand how to filter. And then you got to map it back to top of filter, top of funnel, middle of funnel, and bottom of funnel to map out a whole go-to-market strategy. That's a long-winded point of saying, how do I do this? But that's, it doesn't just stop with doing that analysis. That analysis is foundational. It creates alignment, and then it helps you grow to actually be successful. If you don't do this, if you drop any of those steps along the way, you will fail.
Mic drop.
Mike,
Liz,
did
this
you want to say something? Yeah, go ahead, Renee.
I was just
Go
gonna.
ahead.
I was going to add in. I think that the quantitative, obviously, definitely, you will find things that nobody in the company realizes, and it really is. It's not that hard. It is tedious, but it is important. But once you do that, the qualitative is the step that I find most people skip, and it is even more important. I can't tell you the number of times that I have asked a founder to connect me when we need to go through and redo the strategy, revisit go-to-market, figure out all of these things, where they've connected me with someone that they say is their top customer. And when I get into the conversation to do some qualitative research to understand why they are a raving fan, why they love it, why they have high adoption rates, why they'll pay anything for it, the value that they get is different than what the entire company thinks the value they're getting is. And it can skew who you think your top customer is. So if they have a very specific piece of value that they're getting from it, and you think it's all these products all these features within your product that they're using, and they aren't even touching them, they're going to be different than the people who do use all those features. And that qualitative step is very important to understand.
It's hard to measure, so I think people kind of try to put it behind them or ignore it because it is hard to measure, as important as it is.
We have sort of gotten, I call it's the same thing as attribution crack, right? We have gotten on this measurable, this place where we think everything is measurable and that's how we make every decision. And people's words are also measurable, right? Like it's just smaller points of data, and they're equally as important.
This is one of those areas where we can do a better job as leaders in standardizing the questions that we ask our team to ask in the engagements that they have with customers. And there are a couple of ways to do this. One way to do it is invite others to the call. You can invite marketing to your call with the customer, and then they can ask those questions. You can invite product to the call with your customers and ask those questions. You can use some of the tools that are out there where you're recording these calls and getting some of the data that comes from those recordings. Now we can take this unstructured data and apply some structure to it, leveraging the technology that's available. That's one of the most exciting things for me relative to how the technology continues to emerge and evolve. The key challenge, though, again, as leaders, is we need to align on the thing that we're trying to solve for, whatever that is. Like, let's be really clear around what it is that we're trying to solve for.
Michael,
One of the
I'll
things,
also what you, oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, you just talked about how it is. This is, you're talking about where technology is evolving. We talked about AI in our first round and really help you shine with all of that qualitative data that is unstructured.
I can see we've got a comment, and we'll see if maybe we better get that up on screen or not. But either way, let me share the comment with you. It's great because I hear this a lot. Mark shares in response to my little long-winded diatribe about how do you analyze your market and figure out what to go after. Perfect, thank you. What if your marketing budget only allows you to focus on your target audience and you're not able to engage with those who are in the larger target market who could be your customers? Love that. It's a constraint. I have a resource constraint. It could be money, as it is in this example. It could be people. It could be both. Could be other ones. All right. So I would love to get other people's points of view, but this is what I've done in those situations where I have no money, but I want to go after those other people. Then what I do is I invoke this wonderful thing called dark social. And dark social really simply means I'm going to go after all the places these people live whom I can't spend money on to get in front of. I can't pay for, Google ads. I can't pay for influencers, but I can become a mini influencer in their social channels, in their events, in their community. I can speak, I can make content, I can mail it to them because mail is relatively free. All right. So that's what I tend to do. I insert myself, I make a lot of video content, do a lot of podcasts, do a lot of webinars. Those are negligible costs. They are an effort, I will admit that. But that's how I get to the surrounding adjacent markets that I have no budget for. Thoughts, Renee? Especially, we'd love to hear from Renee. But I think Bryn and Mike might have an opinion here too.
100%. I'm just going to build on what you said for the most part, with an angle to it, which is, Liz, I'm coming to the flywheel. And that is, you have a customer base that is very happy, and you are addressing that with your marketing, right? Now you leverage them to help you bring more people in. So you definitely do everything Daryl said, but what you want to do further is build a community of the people who do love what you do and get them to help you with those efforts to create more demand. So you have that community talking about how this solved their problem, about the same problem that your is, right? Where you're aligned around purpose or a way you're evolving, and you get them talking about it. For instance, is taking a sliver of your marketing budget and putting it towards some initial that enable customers to amplify what they have to say that's positive about us that you share. So you're kind of building that tribe and making it easy, some enablement type things to make it easy for them, things that help.
John, did you want to say something? Thanks, Renee.
I was going to say something tangential to kind of like what you guys are talking about. You guys, it sounds like a lot of the comments that you guys have is about using customer base to expand to new customers or new logos. One thing that I thought, especially because I'm in SaaS, one of the things, we touched upon this in the last episode, is about adoption. I think one good thing for you to take a look at for your customer base, especially the ones that are highly profitable, is to understand how the adoption got there. Because a lot of times, especially in SaaS, you're kind of going bottom up approach, right? You're trying to land team by team by team, as opposed to enterprise all push down, top down. So you kind of need to understand how in your top customer, your most profitable customer, how the adoption got to where you got to. Because one thing that I've learned, probably painfully, is the fact that you cannot rely on the customer to push adoption for you. It's not going to happen unless you make it happen. So you need to understand what success activities happen to make that happen. And then you can try to replicate it against all of your other customers that maybe are not as profitable or didn't have as much licenses being sold or something like that. That's what I was going to say.
Okay, Bryn, go ahead. Thanks, John.
Thank you. And that was great, John. I'm going to go back and Renee and Daryl for a minute. One of the things that as salespeople we tend to do is we go to our clients and say, who else do you know that's like you that could use me? And they shrug and say, can't think of anyone right now. So I'm going to go back to LinkedIn, and this allows us as a tool to search and filter their connections to identify a list of people that they know that we want to meet, and ask for introductions or permission to name drop or to help us invite them to an event or whatever that might look like. So Mark's question was, when I don't have a budget, what can I do? That's free. The second thing I would do is back to my clients and say, who are your other trusted advisors that you're buying from? And now I want to meet them because we are potentially fabulous referral partners. Couple things come from this. Number one, if I reach out and say, hey, Daryl, you and I both work with Liz Hyman. I was talking with her. She says she loves working with you. I thought it might make sense, or she thought it might make sense for the two of us to get to know each other. We get on a call, we build rapport. Now, two things happen from here. Number one, obviously, we're going to build rapport around Liz, but we're going to ask about what other clients are we working with. That's natural, and we can make some introductions for each other. But the second piece of this is because Daryl came in referred from Liz, I feel good referring him to John and to Mike and to Renee, because it's not just some random vendor that I'm having a conversation with. He came in vetted, and he'll feel comfortable introducing me as well. Now, can I just finish one last piece and then I'm done? When you go and I say to my client, who are your trusted advisors around X, Y, and Z? And they're like, we've had some issues. You now have the perfect opportunity to introduce them to people in your network. And so that's all free. It's time, but you don't need a marketing budget to do that well.
And what I was going to say is I want to dive more into that in our next segment when we talk about target lists and growing. So no, that's okay. Bryn is always 3 steps ahead of me. I don't know what to do about it, but that's where we live. No, it's perfect. It's perfect because we're going to dive into that some more as we start talking about how do we target, how do we create a list, a target list, and how do we market to it? How do we reach it? So I want to go back just for a second to something that Daryl said really early on in the process. When he was talking, when this discussion, when he was, process comes out of my mouth. When we started this discussion and he was talking about really digging into the data and figuring out what is there. And I think there's a really important part of this conversation that we missed or that Daryl kind of said, but didn't really dig into. And that is how much misperception we have about who our good or bad clients are. So one of the first things that I see when I walk into a company is this is our largest client. They're 40% of our revenue. And I dig in with them and discover that every month they lose money on that client. So in essence, they work really hard to keep that client. They have to get a whole bunch of other clients and charge them more to support that client. So everybody comes into work every day to support that client that is not profitable. So the first, and when you ask, and Daryl, I know you've done this, which are your profitable clients? No one can tell me. Right. So the second thing is I say, well, which are the target markets you want to go after, or which are your best industries? And so I do what Daryl did, which I kind of call a white space mapping, right? So lay out all the clients, what do they buy, what industry they're in, how big are they, all that stuff. We create this spreadsheet. And then I look and I say, well, these clients buy this and this industry buys this. And you sort of start looking and you'll be like, oh, we're going to go into the auto industry. And then you look and you go, well, it's really funny because they only buy this one product. You have 6 auto industry. They buy this one product. But hey, did you notice this client, this industry, which is hospitals, buys everything? They just don't buy a lot of it. So maybe we can figure out how to get them to buy more of it, right? So actually looking at the data and going, what does this tell me? One, about the clients that I have and how I might grow them, because that's part of targeting. That's part of sales, is growing our existing accounts. But then how do I use that to figure out what I could be doing differently? Can I get these clients who are only buying one thing to buy more? Do I want more of this kind of client or do I want more of this kind of client? Is this product more profitable and these clients buy my least profitable product? Then maybe I should, right? So there's so much in there that we can learn from if we're willing to put aside our perceptions and actually look at it and understand it. Does anybody want to add or comment on that?
You can use data to tell whatever story you want it to tell. I think the big question is, are you giving the data enough space to tell the story that it can tell? And it's nuanced. I get it. There are times where we will use data to reinforce preconceived notions and biases and ideas around what we want to work inside the strategy. And we struggle with identifying where the potential gaps are, where are the things that we want to change, what else do we want to test. Another challenge with the data is if people don't know what question to ask, what information to get, or how we want to categorize that information, then it becomes, there's this bias that can get created that something's not there when it actually is there, and it just is being misreported. So take time, work with your data science team, your data analytics team, your RevOps team, whatever team you have that is excited about working through data, and ask them to look at the data that you have available and see if they can come up with something interesting or something useful out of the data that already exists inside your systems. Many of you have those technical people inside your organizations, but you forget to go and ask the question. And the cool thing about asking the question is many of those people will like to help you because they're trying to figure out a way that they can help drive revenue inside the business that they're working in, better ways that they can serve customers. So ask better questions of your people, you'll get better answers.
I want to build on something quickly here. Sorry. Mike's triggered me. Way to go, Mike. I have seen way too many times where I'm working with fellow leaders, often CEOs or investors, who have a preconceived notion of what they think the answer is. And they go scouring the CRM to build a case to defend their already predetermined notion. So let's be political and bureaucratic for a minute. If you're not good or you don't have access to a resource who can do the counter analysis, then you will go down a long road that's not gonna, it's gonna have a dead end. That's a bad euphemism, but you get the idea. So part of being successful in the revenue pursuits is actually knowing enough to actually present counter arguments and hashing it out and having the courage of your convictions, but having manners and etiquette to deliver your feedback in such a way that it's heard. So that's a real soft skill, but it's going to happen. Mike nailed it. So just so you know, you got to be able to fight data with data.
I'll
Renee?
add
Manners aren't
to
always that important.
What's that?
Daryl's the nice Canadian that's on here, and he said sorry and all those kind of things, but like manners aren't always important. Sometimes you need to have private conversations with people to make sure you understand the agenda and perspective and find out what they're trying to drive, and then figure out how do you get back aligned around what the organization mission or organizations.
And alignment is the brilliant word, but otherwise, shut up, Simmons. No one wants to talk to you. Go ahead, Renee.
Come on, Renee.
I'll add two thoughts to that. One is often that big client that's unprofitable, there is a reason that we're focused on it, right? But everybody needs to be aware and understand what that reason is. If you're a startup and you get a big logo, that could be a huge stepping stone to the next step. And that might be an unprofitable client, right? But we want to be clear why that's important and why we're keeping them, and separate that from how we see as target market, right? So maybe we do want other logos that are similar to them. Let's say it's a startup and it's our first big enterprise logo and it's a well-known brand name and we want to get it out there, and it may be a pain client for us, but we know that there are others that we want. Let's just make sure that everybody is aligned on what parts of it we want more of and what parts we don't. There are other instances where I know when I worked in enterprise level, we would get stuck servicing a client at our unit level division, possibly where they were horrible for our unit, but a larger geography where they were very important. They were the number one client, right? We had to be clear that we had to serve them as well as that market because they were bigger in importance to the overall company than they were to our actual budget, right? So just being very clear on that. And I just also want to add, for the people who are listening who are in smaller companies, so that we don't scare them off, not everybody has a data science team, and you can still do a lot of this data work. And I would recommend that you go into, not everybody has a separate RevOps team either. So one place that I would really recommend that you set up a tiger team to look for this, and that would probably almost always include someone from your CFO's team, right? You may call it accounting or whatever, or auditing or whatever you call it, right? Someone from that team, because they're going to understand how to work with data probably better than anyone. To your point, they are going to be the spreadsheet geniuses within any company. And then someone from your marketing team who also deals with all the data coming in, but maybe doesn't have a sophisticated take on how to sort it. And then you will have other people within your organization that understand the data and bring them to the table. So if you don't have RevOps and you don't have data science, you have people inside the company that can work together as a committee or tiger team or whatever you want to call them to help you with some of these problems.
And I have a very simple spreadsheet. If you have a smaller company and you don't have those resources, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm Liz Hyman. And it's just say, Liz, I want that spreadsheet for analyzing my clients. It's very simple. You can pull most of the information from accounting. It's a really great starting place. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, when you're building that team that Renee is talking about, just ask these questions and do it in a Slack channel, or God forbid someone's using Teams, but do it in do it in a channel where you can communicate with people and just ask, hey, is anybody familiar with pivot tables? The person who's familiar with pivot tables will look like a wizard inside your organization. They will look like people will feel like someone discovered fire around them. Just that question. Does anybody know anybody who's familiar with pivot tables?
Great question.
And you'll get something that's interesting. Then you can go even deeper and be like, hey, anybody use VLOOKUP or concatenate or text to columns or some of these other things like these?
Tableau.
Thank you for laughing. There are some of these things that you can ask that will start to reveal who are the people in your neighborhood who know how to do some of these things. And sometimes they might have like this closet geek who really likes working with data and could do some mean things with a pivot table. So pivot tables
There are also some free tools that you can use. Google's Looker Studio used to be called Data Studio. It can do great wonders for you if you don't have Power BI, if you don't have Tableau, if you don't have some of those tools. That's a free tool that anyone can use.
Okay. Any last thoughts on understanding your client base and how you can use it for growing your business, targeting new accounts, identifying your ideal customer? Any last thoughts before we jump to our next topic?
I'll add in one more. But we talked about the flywheel and getting your customers to help you find more customers. One simple way to start that motion is if you are using NPS, which is Net Promoter Score. That is a data point that you should always be using besides looking within your ideal client, ideal customer profile. Besides looking at the attributes, you want to find the people who are truly happy, and your Net Promoter Score will help you do that all the time. If you consistently track your 9s and 10s, even your 8s within your Net Promoter Scores, and start asking them for quotes and case studies and testimonials and reviews and ratings and referrals, you will start that momentum of a flywheel. And it is one of the easiest ways to build a process around and stand up pretty efficiently.
So Renee, will you define Net Promoter Score, and how does one get a Net Promoter Score?
So Net Promoter Score is a simple survey that you're sending to all of your customers, and you can choose if you're doing it the account level, user level, however you want to do it. But stay consistent, and you're going to send a regular survey out that has one question, one open field, and you're asking them to rank you, and by how they would. It's generally a question: would you recommend us to someone else? Would you recommend us to a friend? Would you recommend this to another business? You want to choose one question, ask that same question consistently. You'll rank somewhere between 1 and 10. Your promoters are anybody 8, 9, 10. And then you will have an open field text. And there is gold in that open field text. And that's some of that unstructured data that you have. And that helps you a lot as well. But just building a process around someone sending out NPS, someone collecting the net promoters, and someone activating the net promoters. I think so many people measure them, but they don't activate them. And you need to really have a system to activate them.
So the key takeaway from this whole conversation is we really need to understand our client base. There are lots of ways to go about that process, but not understanding them and just making assumptions is a really hard way to build and grow your business. Okay, we are now going to jump into our next and final topic. We're going to start talking about creating a list. Creating a list and targeting your market. So Bryn, we're going to get back to some of that LinkedIn stuff we were talking about. So if you want to join us for that conversation, join us on this next podcast. You guys ready? Okay. Hi, I'm Liz Hyman, and this is the Sales SOS Podcast. And I'm here today with your Sales SOS crew, Bryn Tillman, Daryl Prell, Mike Simmons, John Way, and Renee Bigelow. And they are here to answer your toughest sales questions. We are going to be talking now. We've been talking about target market for the last couple of podcasts. And now we want to talk about it. Once we've identified our target market, we've identified our ideal customer, and we're supposed to now start selling and marketing to it. One of the big questions that I hear all the time is, one, how do I create the list of who I want to target and market to? How do I find that list? How do I create that list? And then the second thing is, how do I reach them? How do I do this? Do I do, a massive cold calling campaign? Is that the only way we can do this? Or are there other ways? Is it all just cold emailing? Like, what are some things we should be thinking about? So that's our topic for the next 30 minutes. And I'm going to open up the floor with, let's start with, if I know who my target market is, I know who my ideal customers, how do I create a list? Go ahead, Bryn.
So,
go ahead, Daryl.
Bryn,
next, Bryn.
No, it's okay. Bryn and I are always fighting over who can answer the easy questions. Basically, it's the gist. I look at my ideal customer profile. That's going to be things like demographics, firmographics, etc., and high level attributes that you can filter upon. And then it's the idea that I need to know who are the individual buyers or the personas within the buying committee, so I can then drill down and focus them specifically. So now I'm getting more into job titles, etc. So you got to have access. You got to have, shall we say, corporate alignment on all of those attributes. What is my ideal customer profile? Who's involved in the buying committee? What do those personas look like for each of those buying committee members? What are their attributes that I can filter upon, as we talked about in our previous episode? So I can go into LinkedIn, or I can go into Hoovers or ZoomInfo or something and start building the lists. All right. That's the starting point. Many companies do not have that alignment, or if they do, they'll say they do, but when you drill down, and it's worth drilling down, folks, you'll soon figure out that sales and marketing are actually doing completely different profiles of who their buyer is. And what happens then is you have a huge drop off on leads coming in sourced by marketing, and they don't convert by sales because there's a disconnect and because you attracted the wrong buyer. So you need to make sure you've got that alignment happening and taking place. The other thing you need to do, this is going to sound crazy, I don't think we've talked about it yet, but you need to have clean data. If you don't have clean data, you won't be able to do any filtering. You're just going to get garbage. So that's the starting point of building your list. And then it just gets very much pragmatic, right? So great. Now, who are the accounts that we all want to focus on if we're doing an ABM type approach, etc., making sure there's alignment and allocation between marketing and sales, individual sales reps or sales teams, etc. But that's the starting point. Bryn, what did I miss?
I'm going to yes and that, and because we're talking about filters, and absolutely, if you're using Sales Navigator, you have some very powerful filters that you can leverage in order to get as close to, and I'm sorry, I forget who said I don't like ideal list, but as close to it as we possibly can on the whole buying committee of all the organizations that meet all of the criteria. But the one thing that Sales Navigator or LinkedIn generally can give you that you can't get anywhere else in the world is your social proximity. Who in those accounts do you already know, or do you know someone that knows? And so if we're going an account-centric sales or account-based marketing, when we build out this list, and often what I do for a client is I'll build out with them the exact grouping of companies and or leads that they're looking for. I grab the URL, the link, and you send that to everyone in the company. Now, if they don't all have Sales Navigator, do as best searches you can do in regular LinkedIn. Grab that link. When they stick that link in their LinkedIn and you have it marked as first and seconds, they will see their first and seconds. But now I send it to Liz, she'll see her first and seconds. Send it to Daryl, he sees his, and Renee sees hers, and John sees his, and Mike sees his. So it's not a static list that I'm sending. It's a search criteria. And so now when we're doing these searches, who can get us in highest and hottest? And that's the way that I approach using like LinkedIn Sales Navigator to build out really powerful lists, not just the perfect whales that we want to go with, but the pathways in.
This is one of those areas where it's critical to get that word that we talked about a couple of times so far today, that alignment on what's most important to us. Like, what are these criteria that people are or are not, or fall within, as an example, because you can set up these statements, these searches, these filters inside Sales Navigator or other tools to exclude people who don't fit in that ideal customer profile or ideal client profile or ideal person that you want to talk with. And then you get this information, and not only do you know who do you know that already meets that criteria, but who do you know that knows someone who meets that criteria? And it can be super, super powerful. I think one of the biggest mistakes that people make in this is they try to make those lists too broad. Because there's that whole fear of missing out piece. Like, what happens if I don't make it broad enough? I don't include them, and then I miss out on that opportunity. I'd ask this question: what happens if you get everyone that's in that target list? How does that change your business?
Go ahead, Renee.
Liz, I'm going to offer a little. I sit in the seat of marketing, so I have a little bit different perspective. But I've done this both ways. Where I am in charge of a sales play, and we're going to think through everything and define out and build materials and build the list and give it to sales teams. And I've done it the other way, where we build enough materials and content that we create demand and people come in, right? Either way, what you need to do before you build that list is define a lot of things, and you need materials, because once you have that list, you're going to have to send it out, and it will help inform a better list and a better sales play either way. Is that me freezing? I'm sorry.
I think we all are.
Okay.
There's a little better, as Daryl put it.
Okay. Well, so really defining what that campaign or sales play is going to be will help so much with that list building, and having your materials that you're going to need, getting them out there ahead of time. This doesn't need to be an either or, and a lot of companies approach it as either an outbound motion or an inbound motion, and they really should work together. If you have all those materials, if you have a really good definition, you have the materials that you're going to need for the content that those people need to consume to know that they have the problem, to know that your solution is the right solution for the problem, and how they will go about doing it, then you can build a list of people who come to you while your people are building a list of who they want to call on.
So we want to get the right information to the right people, instead of just, I have a list, let's send them anything, or I created this, so let's send it to everyone. We really want to think about the right messaging to the right people in the right way.
And if you think that out ahead of time and you publish those materials, you're now not only enabling your sales team to get that information out there, but you're making it possible for people to come to you because they self-recognize. And then you can think about getting in other distribution channels where more people can find you.
John, did you want to jump into that?
No, I think Renee said it the best. I thought that was brilliant. So yeah, that was great.
Okay, any last thoughts on building that list before we jump into different ways to reach out to that list? I want to go back while you're thinking about the answer to that to what Daryl said about clean data. So we used to say many, many years ago that in a year, a third of your data was already out of date if you had a list. I don't know if that's still true or if it's way worse. I mean, I know it's at least still a third of your data is wrong. I don't know if it's worse than that now. So when we talk about having a list, it is never a static list, right? So the great thing about using a tool like Zoom Info or Navigator is that that information is constantly being updated. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is when we're talking about a clean list, clean data inside our own system, we want to make sure that, again, we have the titles like Renee was talking about, that we have the right people in the right positions. Before you start mailing, somehow you need to compare that list to some tool that is current instead of just using what's in your CRM and maybe hasn't been touched in a long time. So I just wanted to go back to that concept of clean. Daryl, was there anything else that people needed to think about in that idea of clean data?
Yeah, you need to set expectations with management, especially finance, because you're going to spend money on some of these tools, whether it be Navigator, Zoom Info, or whatever. So Liz is 100% correct that a large percentage of your data will age out, will become obsolete and irrelevant every single year. So that means you need to make an investment to maintain your existing data clean tools, lots are out there. But and often, the classic solution is just to offshore that and have that cleaned manually. That's number one. But number two, talking about the investment required, that means if you're going to use a tool like a Zoom Info as an example, there's a cost to that. And management, for some stupid reason, thinks that if I spend all these tens of thousands of dollars in this tool, that the data is going to be 100% clean. It's not. So expectations management means you need to go tell them, listen, we're going to spend all this money on Zoom Info, and yeah, I know it's exorbitant. And chances are, if it's like best in class, 2/3 of it will be accurate and the third of it will be wrong. Just so you know, right? And they don't like to hear that. Why are we spending this money on this tool? Because without it, I've got nothing, right? So you got to do expectations management and you have to do cleaning. Then there's some internal processes that need to go on. And I love that Renee talked about different motions. We could have a whole episode on motions, inbound, outbound, PLG, partners, whatever it might be. But the idea that both sales and marketing need to have processes defined to clean data. So if marketing's doing email blasts, for example, and we get bounce backs, those bounce backs aren't something to be ignored. Those bounce backs are your lists that you need to then go and clean. Again, ship it off to the person that's offshore. Sales, if you're calling in for Jane Doe and Jane Doe's no longer there anymore, don't just say, oh, I'm sorry. You need to say, who replaced Jane Doe? And then you need to go update the CRM. All right. So those processes aren't in place. You're going to bite, you're going to get bit. You're not going to have success. And you're going to wonder why. You're pointing the fingers different ways. So manage your expectations, have realistic expectations on the quality of data, understand that it's a never ending investment, put processes in place to constantly clean it for anybody that's affected by that. And by the way, I didn't mention it, but customer success and support, same way. All right. So they're going to find bad and dirty data. They need to clean it too. So data is the lifeline of the company. It's what you rely on over and over and over again. That is not optional. So there you go. Go have those hard conversations with finance. Make sure it's a line item in your budget. It's got to happen.
Go ahead, Bryn.
So I love what Daryl's saying. I am going to yes and it again and throw a little LinkedIn into the mix and say, before you reach out to anyone from that list, quickly look them up on LinkedIn and see if they're still there. Number one. Number two. Easy. Right? Number two, if they're not, grab their old title, look up that title in the company page and see who replaced them. And so then when you call, you have the new name. Crazy stuff.
Crazy.
Right? Now, what's amazing in so many different ways is Sales Navigator will connect with Salesforce, Microsoft Dynamics, and HubSpot fully if you have a team of 10 or more. So you can now leverage real time, and LinkedIn is as real time information as you're ever going to get. Someone gets a new job, they update it way before Zoom Info knows, right? So that's going to be pretty up to date. That can help clean your data, right? That having that connection, they can say, yes, this is the new person. And with a click, all the right information is now populated. So had to throw in a little LinkedIn, just my thing.
Liz,
So we have about 10 minutes now. Let's talk about, yeah, go ahead, Renee.
I was just going to add, I haven't heard any of us mention this one thing, and this is another one marketing can help with. You also can build based on behavior, your lists, right? So let's say, particularly, you mentioned product-led growth, right? If you have a product-led growth motion, people who do certain things, right? A certain level of adoption, using certain feature sets, using certain things, those are great lists to build based on behavior. That gets you into some of these larger accounts. You can do the same thing with other types of lead scoring within your own database, right? When you have that first party data of behavior, that's a great way to think about a list building criteria.
So I often think about somebody who's had a new sales leader for a very short period of time, or a company who doesn't have a CRO or a VP of sales, right? So sometimes when you're looking at it and you're doing the criteria, it's what they haven't done yet or about to do or are doing. So
yes, absence of behavior can be a great reason for a list too.
Yeah. Okay, 10 minutes left. Let's talk a little bit about, okay, have a list. Now what? What do I do? I have a list now.
I'll add, you're going to need to have if this is brand new, if this is something you haven't sold on before, in sales management, marketing management can help with this if you need, but having some templated things that help whoever is about to go out with that list to like guides along the way to help them know some of the messaging for why that list was built, right? If it was behavior based, what is the messaging that goes on it? If it was target based, whatever those things are, having some of those. I'm not a huge fan of scripted. I think it comes off as scripted, but templates that help people with those guideposts along the way.
You can design for success, right? Like, you design backward, execute forward, know where you want to go, begin with the end in mind, leverage your Covey design thinking principles. However you want to look at this, say, all right, here's where I want to be. I want to generate revenue. Well, what has to happen before that? What happens before that? What happens before that? And what happens before that? And then start to think about the different types of communication you want to put out there and tests that you want to put out there that have a very simple call to action for people, so that you can measure whether or not that call to action actually takes place. The call to action could be book a meeting. It could be click on a link. It could be join a webinar. It could be whatever, but what it should not be is, hey, if you'd like to know more, click on this link, book a meeting, go to a webinar, and send us the first name of your oldest child. Like, we've got to be careful about what we're asking people to do, because if we start to ask too much, we insert too many variables, it gets really hard for us to figure out what is working or not working relative to the list.
So we want to take them on a journey and not throw the spaghetti against the wall. Go ahead, Brent.
Take them on a journey.
Yeah. So I think the first thing that I'd want to do with the list is now determine what challenge are they facing before they know they need me. And I want to create thought leadership and content and insights that's handling or addressing the challenge before they're shopping my solution, so that I'm the one that's influencing them when they realize that this is the next step in solving this challenge. So taking that list and making sure that it's all the right people and all the right companies is great. But now I've got to qualify them in. and I'm going to qualify them in based on where they are today. At least that's my perspective on this. And so if that is information or content or a webinar, as Mike is talking about, that interests them, I'm getting them at the right time. Sometimes as sales and marketers, we're getting to them a little too late, where our competitors have already influenced them in their buying decision. And we want to make sure that if we're going to invest our time with these prospects, that they are positioned to be the shortest of sales cycles that possibly can happen inside of my organization. And so when you can get them opting in at the right time, you have the shortest sales cycle possible in my experience. I just wanted to say I'm Bryn and I'm done. It was almost a Clubhouse moment for me.
What's Clubhouse? So
You're not in a clubhouse? That's not where you
So-
are right now?
no,
It looks like a clubhouse to me.
It does look like
It
a
does.
clubhouse.
I agree. So, Liz, you asked such a loaded question. I got the list. Now what? That's we could spend hours talking about this, but let me be a little, a very high level. To me, there's kind of sales and marketing both help. Marketing's going to be more shotgun. Sales is more of a rifle. That's the first part. The assumption is we have our list
We have to have war analogies here, Daryl.
Yeah, we have to. We have to.
Liz was
I
attacking
didn't
people
bring up the sports
earlier.
analogy yet. So the assumption if we have our list is that we already have our defined target audience and buyers and ICPs and all that kind of stuff. If you're marketing, then what's your go-to-market strategy? What are the motions you want to use, right? That's a very, if it's inbound, for example, then I want to identify the specific personas I want to go after. I want to make those target lists. I want to go after them. If it's an ABM model, probably in pay-per-click. I want to do some email campaigns. I want to do some social outreach, that kind of stuff. So classic outreach stuff I should be doing, just marketing 101. But if you're sales, I think, the next step, if you haven't already done it, is, okay, who are the people in the buying committee from my list? And do I have playbooks built for all of them? I want to do 21 touches in 30 days. What are the touches? Phone, email, social media, LinkedIn especially, right? It could be direct mail. It could be a variety of tangible touches and frequency to make sure that we have that consistent touches, because often, what's the last stat? It takes 10, 12, 13 touches before they respond to you. I've lost track anymore.
I don't know what it is now.
Right. But to Renee's point, you need the right messaging. And then the other thing you have to do is sales and marketing need to get in alignment. And what are the lead magnets that these people have interest in? Because I will use those lead magnets in the playbooks. I'll similarly use them in my pay-per-click ads or my email blasts or what have you. So it's really about what's our go-to-market strategy. And GTM, that's another 2 or 3 or 4 episodes on its own we can talk about. So, it's a big ass picture, but you need the list. The list is the fuel. See, there we go. Is that a sports analogy? I don't know. It's a car analogy. It's the fuel, whereas sales and marketing are the engine that rely upon the fuel, but they still have to run the plays that they respectively own.
But
And it has to be intentional and aligned.
you take us back, though, really quickly to what we've been talking about in the last couple of episodes is you've just defined something very expensive with all these different pieces. And the more targeted your list is, the better use of resources you have, right? You can't do that. You can't boil the ocean with all of the things that you just talked about.
Nailed it.
Liz, can I add one more thing?
Absolutely.
You have a list. What now? This is another place where I see a lot of marketing teams drop off, and sometimes it's for budget. But when you go to the trouble of designing a campaign, building a playbook, having the templates, building a list, having messaging for all of them, one of the things that really helps tip this over is providing something I call air cover. And if your sales team is going to be calling on people, and your marketing team is running campaigns that has the same messaging to that target audience, so you can take that same target audience and build ad targets, right? You could take the same accounts that you're trying to reach. You could upload your specific list if it's large enough, and you can run ads that support the same messaging that your sales team is sending out as air cover, so that they get that additional touch. You on the marketing side, you have a messaging rule that my personal cheat sheet to it is 8 to 10 times over 3 to 5 formats. Now your sales plays will add to that too, and marketing can help reach those numbers. And it's sort of it's going to build on something called repetition priming, so that your sales team has a better shot of success. And that repetition priming is just psychology. The more you see something, the more you recognize it, the more you're willing to take action on it, essentially. And that repetition priming, that air cover of ad campaigns or other marketing campaigns on top of the sales efforts to the same people, has tremendous value.
Thanks, Renee. Okay, so we're at the end of this episode. Any last thoughts before we wrap it up? No, we touched it all. Yes, Mike.
I think one of the other ones is, so you've got a list, and then you engage with the list. And we talked about it a little bit earlier, around kind of like who are some of the people that they know who fit this profile when you engage in the conversation. Another question you might want to ask when you engage with the list, or you start doing research on the list, start to either ask them directly, where do they go when they're looking for information? What events do they participate in? Or look at, when you do the research on the list, what events are they promoting on their LinkedIn page? Where are they saying that they're going to? I know the first time I got to meet Daryl in person was at B2B when he was out here in Scottsdale one year. And that, although I'm not the ideal customer for a B2B event, I absolutely want to go hang out in the lobby of that hotel when that event's happening, because my ideal customers are congregating there. And it's not worth it for me to invest in that kind of an event to have a booth or to have a badge or work around, but there's an opportunity to hang out where people congregate, where people eat, drink, sleep. This is where you can create a very interesting and targeted approach to hunting. And I am not going to pull out rifles or shotguns or any of those other things, but we can go in there and we can start to figure out, okay, where are all these people going and how do we build from there? Yes, I did just want you to buy me drinks, Daryl. So thank you. Yes, I just shared some of the, so there's a chat going on in the background, and every once in a while, Daryl will drop things in there periodically, and I just outed him. So there you go. You're welcome, Daryl.
So to wrap it up, I think, getting the list, coming up with a plan, that's the key. Get the list, get the right list, get a clean list, and then make a plan and execute it. But I think one of the things that Mike is leaving us with is, let's get creative. Just to put in context, you're marketing me. I got 4,000 emails last month. I only know that because I fired my admin and she didn't clean it up before she got fired. So 4,000 emails. What is the chance that I saw yours? And these are from my friends. These are, they're my newsletters that I like to read. How can 4,000? So if you don't get creative about where else your customer is, I also get, by the way, at least 10 or 20 requests to connect from people who directly want to sell to me in my LinkedIn. So if you think that you're being unique by doing that, remember who I am as your buyer, and I am bombarded. So how are you going to get creative to reach your target market where they are doing what they like to do in a way they're going to respond to? And that's not an easy answer.
That's the dark social that Daryl talked about.
Dark social, yeah.
I was actually going to
also
say
multi-touch.
I think it's more than being creative, Liz. And creative can take a lot of ways. Like, you can stand out with a lot of creativity, get your message through with creativity. But what I think you're all saying is being human, right?
Yeah.
Like showing human interest in other humans' problems. And how do you do that? Maybe it's show up in person, maybe it's dark social, maybe it's the right way, the human connectivity in the messaging, right? Like, I think that's where sales gets to take that one-to-one messaging so much further than marketing gets to with the one-to-many.
Absolutely. Yep. All right, well, let's wrap this one up. The next time we get together, our next 4 episodes are going to be focused on building your sales team from the ground up, which is one of my favorite topics. So your crew and I will be here, same place, same time.
Well, not same place for me.
Not the same place. Renee, for those of you who are not watching, Renee is sitting in her car. And Daryl, if you haven't seen it, is sitting in his camper out in this beautiful setting. And the rest of us are stuck inside. All right, everybody, have a great day and happy selling, and we'll see you soon.
Bye, everyone.